Hey there, and welcome back to Continual, and welcome to the panel room. Yay! I'm your host, John Hartness, and joining me tonight for a discussion on judging a book by its cover are three of my favorite cover artists. And I only employ two of them, so you know that there's talent involved here. So we're going to talk about what makes a great cover, how they became cover artists, because that's not one of the things that people show up at your high school on career day and say, do you want to be a book cover designer when you grow up? So we'll talk about how they got into doing this work and what kinds of processes they go through. But first, as always, we'll let them introduce themselves. Hey, Melissa, who are you?
I'm Melissa McArthur. I'm associate publisher at Falstaff. So I'm one of the two that works with John. Also do editing, covers, obviously, and teach college.
Maya?
I'm Maya Preisler. I am the social media and marketing person for Mocha Memoirs Press, which involves creating a lot of graphics and occasionally awesome book covers.
And Natania.
And hey, I'm Natania Barron. Most of the time I'm a writer. I work in my day job in marketing, so I've been doing that for a long time. And I kind of came across sideways into cover design, but I will say that fine art was my first love. So even before I was a writer, I was a painter. So I think it's kind of a natural thing for me to fall into. Like holes and puddles and things when I'm not looking where I'm going, but that's a different story.
That kind of segues right into my first question, which is, what was your background as a visual artist prior to starting to do this? So Natania, just keep going.
Sure. Yeah. I mean, I'm really lucky in that I grew up in kind of an unconventional household with just art all around me. My dad is an accomplished musician and has been in bands ever since before I was born. For 10 years, they tried to make it in music before I was born. My mom has been painting ever since she was tiny. So I always had access to any medium I wanted. I mean, I was crayons and pastels and charcoal and paint at such a young age that was just a very natural early thing for me to do. And I think being around that, I developed I love color and I love composition. Certainly in my own writing, fashion is something that influences me a lot. So to me, the lines really blur. And for me, my first pictures of myself when I wanted to draw what I wanted to be when I grew up was myself with a beret and an easel and a paint thing. I mean, that's just what I excelled at. I was just naturally, I think it was the first thing that I realized I had. Not that I was better than everybody else, but I seemed to have an aptitude for it that came easily to me, unlike a lot of other things that felt like they were a lot harder to get. And so my first memories in kindergarten were, my teacher going, "Oh, wow, this is incredible. This is really good." And my mom got me into art classes and things of that nature. So yeah, it's always been a part of who I am. And I think that helped. I, studied in school in English, but I quickly got into marketing because it made more money. But the art side of it, the art side of it's really helpful. I run a marketing department, and I kind of, when you are in that function, you really have to know all the bits and pieces. So you have to have an artist's eye, and you have to have a copywriter's, eye, and then be able to think about all those different things. So that's kind of how I stumbled sideways into it.
Now, do you have a beret? You have to have.
I do have a beret. I made it myself.
All right. I would have been so disappointed if you didn't.
It's magenta and it's felted, but yes, I have my own beret.
Of course it is.
Because of course I knit. Of course I do. I mean,
Maya, how did you end up what did you do artistically before doing covers?
I think I'm similar to Natania in that I have literally been making art since I could pick up a pen. I was the kid who always got in trouble for drawing in school instead of taking notes or paying attention. So it was pretty natural for me to pursue an associate's in advertising and then a Bachelor of Fine Arts. The problem is really sort of narrowing it down from that point because I too fell in love with all of the mediums. So my degree is officially in cross-disciplinary studies. Which is a fun way of saying I have big problems committing to one medium.
It's like a friend of mine who got his master's in liberal arts.
Yes, you can do that.
And I was like, you want to narrow that down? He said, no, that's exactly the point. And I said, and this is why you're working on your master's still at
Yeah.
40. I said, yes. This was when I was in undergrad, and he had been at Winthrop the entire time,
Wow.
from 18 to 40. I think
He's a professional student.
he did graduate. I don't know with what degrees. But now, Maya, you've also exhibited and sold art at conventions as well.
Yes, I have been exhibiting art at conventions for, oh gosh, it's probably been at least 10 years now, doing cover art for badges and for the books, making pieces to give to guests of honor, random geeky bits of goodness.
Cool. And Melissa, what was your background in visual art before doing this stuff?
Absolutely nothing. Yeah, one of these things is not like the other. No, everything that I did was based on words. And so I went and got a couple degrees, and then pretty much everybody threatened, to lock me away if I went back to college again. So I saw Photoshop and I'm like, hey, that looks like fun. And so I taught myself how to use it.
It's a gateway drug.
It is. It is.
Yeah, it really is. Yeah, I've discovered Illustrator now, and it's
Yep.
And that whole monthly subscription feels like such a small amount of money, and then you just keep adding pieces onto it, or some of you find companies to pay for full licensed subscriptions. And then before you know it, you have 200 stock images saved up, and yeah.
Yep.
So, Melissa, what made you want to start designing book covers, and how did you get started?
Honestly, it's because I wanted to self-publish a story so I could tell, because I was editing and I wanted to be able to tell the writers like what the process was like going through like Amazon. It was in CreateSpace back then. So I figured, oh, well, I can't just publish a book without a cover. So I made a cover. And then people wanted me to make them for them. So I did. And I got, over time I got, okay at it. I mean, the first ones aren't terrible, but they're not good.
See, that's the difference between you and me. I self-published quite a few things, and I made the covers for it, and literally no one came to me and said, you should do the covers for my books, because they saw the covers that I created.
Well, the first one that I did, I actually used, I didn't understand how stock art worked, so I just went and took a picture.
That works too, though.
Yeah.
And I didn't know how filters worked, so I waited till it rained and took it through a window.
Oh, bless your heart.
Hey, that's old school.
That's so cool.
This is the analog way of doing it.
I know.
Actually, you know what? I lied. I did do a lot with photography, with film photography.
Okay.
That helps. Sure.
So I just had it from a, things already existed standpoint.
Well, and you also have a background in theater, so that sense of composition and composing a picture, because that's my background. So when I'm looking at covers that people who are better than me do, that can help me with, hey, can we move this over a little? Hey, can we bring this forward a little?
Mm-hmm.
In the great detailed instructions that I give to my cover artists.
Right.
Don't make it suck. Maya, what about you? What got you into doing book covers?
I think the first book cover that I made was by, I guess, virtue of nepotism. My mother worked for social services, and one of her coworkers wanted to publish a book for kids on the foster and adoptive care experience. And so everybody thought that having a former foster child / adoptive child would illustrate it would be perfect. And so they picked me. And then other people wanted books, and then I was selling art at conventions, and people started coming by and saying, hey, would you do a book cover? And I said, yes, absolutely, because reading was probably right up there with art as my first love as a child. So combining the two is just perfect.
And Natania?
I think it went something like this: is I was I was exposed to a certain book, and I won't say which one because it'll be too easy to figure it out, and I don't want people to get feelings hurt. But I made the sort of snide notion that I thought I could improve some of your book covers, and kind of went ahead and did it. And you were like, yeah, why don't you do more of these? And then I started doing more of them. And I think a lot of it was like kind of a weird confluence between my years of working in marketing and social media for a really long time and kind of having an eye for this new digital world. So I think it's very different now to design book covers than it was 10 years ago. You really have to be able to, you have to think of a whole bunch of different things. And in fact, I kind of prefer that people have more of a social media digital eye than they do for even the kinds of graphics we have are just so beyond the hand painted, hand lettered kind of stuff we saw, the Terry Goodkind books or the early books. But I've always loved book covers. I've always loved fonts and typefaces. Like I have emotional relationships with some of them and I can't really explain to you. I know I'm not exactly super neurotypical, so that does not make sense to a lot of people, but the way the lines are in certain letters and certain typeface groups make me feel different ways. And I get probably unusually furious when I see bad typeface in book covers, and it instills kind of rage in me, and I want to help people so that I don't feel that way. So it's a little bit self-serving. I don't want my wonderful friends who write great books to have bad book covers. So, and that's my own opinion, and I keep those in my head because my inside judge is kind of a jerk sometimes. But indoor voice, outdoor voice, these kinds of things are important. But yeah, it's been a great experience for me because it's helped me level up in my professional life as well as my off time. And for me, I spent a lot of time writing and kind of in the world of text, and I also spent a lot of time figuring out what font to use when I'm writing that too. That's a whole other story. But it's really helped me kind of think about how to do things in both worlds. And it's very therapeutic for me to design. Even sometimes when John will come up with ideas, like I got these 3 elements and I want you to make a cover out of them. And I'm like, a pyramid, a dragon. And so, yeah. And it might take a while. There's this kind of magic moment though, when it sort of tips over and you're all of a sudden you're like, oh, this is coming together and this is something exciting. And that is, I feel like my brain compiles when I'm in the art world and all the layers and all of that stuff. And so I gain a lot from it. I mean, I can be a snarky brat about it, but I do gain a lot of it about it too. So
that was one of my favorite emails when I said, okay, so I've got this pyramid in the book and then we need a dragon and it's on the Mississippi River.
Yeah.
Go. And that cover turned out really good.
It did, yeah. But that was one where I was like, I don't want it to, these are stock pictures, but I don't want them to look like stock pictures. And I think we all, at least I started with kind of like, oh, but I shouldn't mess with the stock image too much. And then eventually I was like, no, I'm going to screw with it totally. And I'm going to, and then you find now, even the difference in the last 4 years, places like Unsplash exist where you can find just amazing textures. You used to have to download texture packs and you used to buy high resolution images of concrete. And now there's just all this free to use everywhere. And so it really helps you. And not to mention the subscription services like Envato Elements and all of these other stuff out there that really help sort of us who are, not necessarily paying every bill with it, but it's helping us get on. So, yeah.
So let's talk a little bit about some of these resources that you guys use as designers. We've kind of quick hit on a bunch of them, but where do you find your base images? If someone's out there with a BFA in painting, and now they want to do cover design, but they know they can't fully paint every cover because not everyone can pay for that. Where do they start? And Melissa, you probably started most recently with this. So what was the first thing you glommed onto?
As far as a resource?
Yeah.
Probably Adobe stock, because it's a subscription-based model. It's like $30 a month, and you get 10 images. That and gosh, what's the name of the other one? iStock Photo. And because that one deposit photos, and those just different sites. But yeah, probably that's the first resource that I went to. And like you mentioned earlier, the Creative Cloud subscription for Adobe to have all the programs. Because if you download, an Illustrator file, you really kind of want Illustrator to be able to open it, especially if you want to change it, like Natania was talking about. Because I did that a lot too. I was like, nope, we can't change it. It's got to be the exact perfect image. No, not anymore.
Camera raw filter will change your life in Photoshop. Like, oh, you don't like the dress being green? I can make it purple. Just give me a second.
And then you learn about layers and layers and layers.
And even
then you learn
layer folders.
Yes. And then you learn there's a maximum file size that PSDs can be.
John's covers have hit that before.
Yep. I have learned when you're uploading covers to the presses, flatten the image.
Yeah, oh, for sure.
Keep one master so that you can access the layers, but then you just flatten it and save it as a copy, and then you won't have to wait 20 minutes for that file to upload to Ingram, because some of those Fugue and Fable covers had a lot of layers.
Well, also some people who wanted the Fugue and Fable books also wanted really, really specific things. That was a lot of hand-done stuff too, but yeah.
Yeah. So yeah, we learned to flatten. Maya, what's one of the resources that you have glommed onto that has been really helpful for you?
I am a big fan of Pexels, like pixels, but with an E. I found their stuff on Pixabay, and I went over there and I found that they have a wide selection of people from around the world. So if I search for African women, I can spend 3 hours scrolling through the options, which is really important for me because I often need images of Black people in my work, and a lot of the other stock photo sites don't have what I'm looking for.
No, it's really hard to find models of color for book covers. So yeah. Natania, what's one of your favorites?
I totally agree with Pexels, and Unsplash is Unsplash kind of a little bit more in sort of textures and abstract and sky things and things like that. I love using gradients, like sky gradients, to kind of add texture to images and kind of add a little bit of fun with some layers. But I will say I sort of discovered I do a lot of urban fantasy covers, and Neo Stock is a really cool, it's a subscription service. It's not as cheap as any of the others, but it's this guy that does amazing galleries of every position you could ever imagine a human being standing in. And if you're really good, you can switch out heads, which I do too all the time. As long as the lighting is right, you can usually fake it pretty well. And that's really, really helpful. I do wish there were more body types and a little bit less of the leather on the urban fantasy, but you can pretty much find just about anything in terms of steampunk, in terms of historical. There's even Western, there's cyberpunk. So you can kind of get a good basis for building on stuff later. And that's been really helpful in some of the series that I get, because I do get quite a few authors who have like 5 or 6 books, since we need continuity. And that's a real struggle, even with Shutterstock or Adobe stock, because you're not going to get similar lighting. You're not going to get, even the same model might be just drastically different. Gail Martin's books are a good example of like having to drag the bottom. Like I've already used this image of this guy. Okay, are we going to use the same suit again? Because I got this, this shot of this guy, but I guess we can change it around. So that's really good. And then, for me, the bang for the buck for Envato Elements has been huge, because Envato Elements not only has amazing stock photography, video, and everything. I think it's like $180 a year. But they also have add-ons for Photoshop, and add-ons for Photoshop transformed my ability. Like I'm doing all of Laura Ann Gilman's Retriever series, and the main character is urban fantasy, and she can summon lightning. So lightning is a big deal. Well, I was paying all this money for lightning stock images. I just learned how to make lightning. So there's an add-on that basically walks you through how to make lightning, and then you can change the color. You can decide how much you want of it, how big it is, how small it is, and that was really huge because that saves me a ton when I'm, if I'm having to spend out of my pocket to buy stock image of lightning. It's much better for me to make it on my own. And I love when an author comes to me with a challenge and it has to push me past my comfort zone and I have to learn something totally different. And I did that with one of Gail's recent books as well, where it was like, I wanted this really stark kind of movie poster look to it. And it took an add-on to really show me how to do this really cool, like above lighting that even impacted a flat picture. So there's just, I know that there's only like a tenth of what I'm doing is what is available on Photoshop, but it's cool because I learn something new every couple of months. Something just completely propels me forward. So
one of my favorite things that I found over the past few years is a texture pack that I can add into texts to make them look metallic.
Yeah, that stuff's really
cool. That's one of my favorites, so that I can, for militaristic or mil sci-fi kind of shiny covers, because Chris Kennedy, who's another publisher, I just emailed him and said, hey, how do you make the letters look like that? And he said, I don't know, but I copied my cover artist on this. And his cover artist said, oh yeah, you use these here, you download them for free from here.
Yep.
I was like, and then I sent them to Melissa.
John, you can apply those to more than just text.
I don't have to know that because I'm not allowed to do covers anymore.
Yeah, we do what we're good at. It's cool. It's okay. It's okay to let go of the things that energy you can put somewhere else, John. Let's just put it that way.
Yes.
Writing more Harper
I've often
books.
said that the first Bubba the Monster Hunter collection looked like an 8th grader's first Photoshop project with Times New Roman flat text lettering with a heavy drop shadow.
Bless your heart.
Because I had about an 8th grader's understanding of Photoshop when I created that cover, and I did use Times New Roman flat font with a big old drop shadow behind it.
You did though rotate the image. That's probably 9th grader level.
Yeah. The funny thing is that's why the cover is white, because I couldn't figure out how to rotate just the sign. So it rotated the whole damn canvas. And I was like, fine. It'll be sideways.
Well, I will say I think 2 versions ago in Photoshop, they finally released the select object. And it was like the most transformative thing ever, because you used to have to there were some ways you could do it and like all kinds of, but this is like 90% of the time it knows what the object is in the picture and you can kind of fix it instead of having to work on other stuff. So that would have helped you back then. Photoshop's come a long way in the last couple of years. So
yeah, that book is also 8 years old. So it was due for an update when we did the series. So when you're creating a cover, how does it start, Maya? What's the first piece? How does it come to you? What's the conversation like? Talk us through your process.
It depends on the cover. Usually there's some sort of image that appears. Either it's something that I've found, because, like the conversation about the collection of thousands of stock photos, I have several gigs worth. And sometimes I'm having a conversation with the author and they tell me about the book and I go, oh, that's why I saved that photo 5 years ago. I know exactly what I need for this. And then sometimes, like in the cover process for like making my own cover for my book, it's constantly going back and doing it again and again and again and again until it suddenly clicks. But for me, there's definitely always a moment of it clicking into place in my head, sort of an aha where it feels right. And from there, it starts to flow. It's just that persisting with as many variations as it takes until I get to the point of it clicking. And from there, it's just developing it further. Mm-hmm. So like, for example, with the the Kill Three Birds cover that I did for Nicole, she sent me a couple of inspiration photos, and one of them was this beautiful woman with a headscarf, and she had really beautiful face paint on. And there was a photo I had saved back in March of a girl with really dramatic lighting and a headscarf and face paint. And I went, oh, I know, I have the perfect photo from that. And it became Prentice.
That cover is gorgeous, by the way.
Thank you.
That covers why she's on this panel.
Oh,
Because I saw that and I was like, hey, we should get Maya on this panel that we're doing about covers.
thank you.
So, Melissa, what about you?
It starts a little bit different every time. It depends a lot on if it's coming from you or somebody else. If it's coming from you,
It's half a sentence that's largely incoherent and maybe a sketch on a cocktail napkin.
right. Sometimes the authors will have, a whole thing that they're like, I want this in this corner and this in this corner. And like when I was working on Dragon Nemesis, the cover for that, Chris and I sat down and he told me exactly what he wanted, a helicopter on fire and a dragon and, this person with these eyes. And, it was extremely detailed, which made it, really nice because then I just had to find the different pieces. But sometimes, it's, well, I want something that looks good. And that's about it. So
I call it giving you artistic freedom.
yeah. So if that's the case, a lot of times what I'll do is I'll just kind of go browsing around the stock sites and download a whole bunch of preview files, and then start plopping them down into Photoshop or something, and kind of mixing and matching until something clicks and starts to look nice together.
And Natania?
I think similar, to both, but I definitely come at it from an author perspective because I don't do a ton. I'm very selective about what I do just because I'm a super busy person and I really enjoy doing it, but I don't have time to do it all the time. So most of the people that I'm working with, I know pretty darn well, and we kind of each develop our own thing. But more than anything, like, I really don't have an ego about this. Like, I really don't care. And I feel this way about my job too. Like, I don't care what it looks like as long as it's well done and it works. Right. So I also know that if I just go in my own direction and the author hates it, they're not going to want to share it. And that's kind of not the point, right? They've got to be proud of the work. They've got to want to put it out there. And having been on both sides, like, I've done some of my own covers, but I've had other people do my covers before, which is kind of a weird experience too. But that's where I first started. And I was so lucky to have such consistency. In fact, I've had myself and two other different artists do covers for my books, and people think they were all the same person because I guess that there's a certain dark, misty look to the work that I do with glowing things. And I guess that's kind of the brand or whatever. But yeah, I want the author to feel proud of it. I want to feel the way I feel when I get that book. And I've had a little bit of back and forth, but trusting the artist to do their work too. It is most fun when someone's like, just go crazy, just do what you want and take it in whatever direction you want. Most recently with John, your most recent one where we were like, you're like, can you get a real badge? And I was like, probably not, because that would probably have legal infringement. And I really don't want us to get arrested or get put in jail right now. So it's the only badge that I could find that's kind of like a faux looking badge. But then you're like, can it be put together and cracking apart and then have a thing around it? And then can you have these letters instead? And so ultimately it came together really well. But yeah, there's that cool moment, like Melissa was saying, where you're just kind of waiting for the pieces to come together. And there's no predicting when that's going to be. With some people, it's like the first or second draft and we're almost there. With other people, it can take 20 iterations to get it right. But you also, from a business perspective, I'm starting to have to go, okay, now we've gone through 6 revisions, so we're going to have a hard stop here and discuss my time. But yeah, that's kind of how I do it. But yeah, with you, it's kind of like reading your mind generally, except when we don't. We've only had, I think, 1 or 2 complete disagreements, and then it was okay because we like each other and we're like, maybe this isn't a good fit for this, and that's not a big deal. We can still work together.
Yeah, it's not like we're going to okay, we should just never speak again because that's silly.
Yeah, no, totally. And I,
We'll
like I
just-
said, I don't have a
we'll
lot
do
of
the next
ego invested in it. It's just, it's not my artist expression. It's not something I painted by myself with my own eyes. This is something that's your product. So just like with any marketing thing, I'm part owner, but really more of a director.
And a lot of times I'm serving as the de facto art director.
Mhm.
So I'm interfacing between the author, the story editor, the artist, and the guy who has to meet the deadlines
Yep.
and pay for the revisions if we do too many.
Right.
So sometimes I know I'm going to make someone unhappy. I don't,
Hopefully people are grown-ups about it. And
meh, they can't fire me. So what is, if there was one thing that you had, were going to tell somebody to focus on, what's the most important thing that makes a great cover? And you won't be allowed to repeat each other. So Natania, you can go first.
well, I'm going to say it's typeface. I think more than ever, sorry, Melissa, more than ever, especially with the sort of the glance test that you have to do with digital, it's got to be, it's hard because it's got to be unusual. I won't say unique because it can't be unique, right? It's not one of a kind unless you're building your own font, and then you're beyond my abilities. But it's got to stand out, but it's also got to be easy to read, and it's got to make an impact. And you really only have in this world a handful of seconds to make that across. And if your typeface is not strong and you can't read the cover, I mean, I've seen beautiful books on the Kindle store or in Amazon, and you're just like, is that the Gob's Nugget? You know, you have no idea what it is. It's like the Gambit's Noodle. I don't know what that is. I want to write that book now.
Yeah, I kind of want that book now.
But also the placement of everything and sort of the hierarchy of fonts and typeface and figuring out how that's all going to work together. I'm working with someone who was a USA Today bestselling author, and the more stuff that you try to fit on that front, it starts to get crowded. And then you start going, well, what is the most important part here? And what is going to sell this? And then we've got to figure out a way around that. So
Yep.
that's me.
Maya?
I second the comment about typeface. That is important, but since we're not allowed to repeat each other, that's not my answer. I'm just agreeing.
In addition to typeface.
In addition to typeface, visual appeal. And not just visual appeal, but visual appeal for the genre. So if it's a paranormal romance novel, it probably, I mean, I guess it could have a spaceship, but there should probably be two people kissing in front of the spaceship.
We'll call it.
And then maybe some sort of glowy magic.
But no magical fart smoke.
Right.
There's a ban on our covers. No magical fart smoke.
A lot of people like it, John.
I know. I'm not those people. If there's a cover that it really needs magical fart smoke, you can sell me on it.
I believe the technical term is the eldritch fart, but
The eldritch fart.
Yeah, none of my responses to that are acceptable given the rating for this for the channel. So Melissa, in addition to no magical fart smoke and being visually appealing and fitting the genre and having great typeface, what's the most important thing about a cover?
Being able to tell what it is when it's a thumbnail.
mm-hmm.
Yes.
So, you know, because you have to just, like, if you're scrolling through Amazon, they're going to be this big. And so, you know, kind of being able to kind of get at least a feel for the genre or what one of the major features might be or something like that. So yeah, thinking about seeing it in different ways, like as a thumbnail from across a room, you know, blown up big on a banner, you know, things like that. So, you know, having it different sizes.
Yeah, that's one I've seen best-selling authors who there's not enough contrast between the image and the typeface. So when it shrinks down, those letters are just a blurb. Blah, blah, blah. Yeah, no idea what that says. Probably looks great in a 6x9 hardcover in your hands.
Mm-hmm.
Doesn't look so great when it's 2 inches tall on your screen or half an inch tall on your phone screen.
Right. And given this year and things that have occurred in this year,
Our current circumstances.
Hand selling is not what we're doing. So you could kind of I think you could get away with it when, if you're a big author and the majority of your stuff is going to be in bookstores and people are going to be perusing that. But to sell your books and to do the social media support, right? If it doesn't look good on Twitter in a graphic shrunk down, that people aren't going to see it. They're not going to care,
Yeah. Especially on things like Twitter that scroll so fast.
So fast.
That stuff goes by so quickly.
Mm-hmm.
Now, what's one thing that you frequently see overlooked when you look at cover design, Melissa?
Consistency, like within a series particularly.
Okay.
Shifting the font or moving the text up and down, or those kinds of things. I like them to all match and go along together so it looks like a unit. And I think a lot of times, especially if you're not beginning to write it intending it for it to be a series, you don't really think about that as much, and then you get stuck being able to find images and things that work. So I think sometimes that consistency gets overlooked a little bit.
Guilty. That's why Natania and I went back and redid the first 3 Bubba the Monster Hunter books when we did book 4, because books 1 through 3 looked nothing like one another, because I did books 1 and 2. And no, I did all 3 of the first 3. The third one looked okay.
Yeah, that was the one with the guitar, right?
Yeah. And we kind of recreated that, actually. We kind of ripped on it.
Yeah.
I think my favorite though is the one with the claw marks. That one just came out really cool when you printed it out. It looked like it was scratched, which was kind of cool.
Yeah, that was the second one.
Yeah.
So Natania, what's one thing that you see people skip over or not spend enough time on when they're designing covers?
Well, it's kind of the opposite, and I think that because it is harder, and it's that people overcomplicate their covers. They put too much on it. They want a border. They want more effects on it. They want to include, like you said, some authors have a really clear idea of everything they want in the cover. And sometimes that doesn't make for a good cover. To me, I think YA is the best in the business right now, with minimalistic covers that are gorgeous, that don't have a ton of stuff happening, but immediately. Leigh Bardugo is a great example of her. Yeah. Her books, no matter what genre she's writing in. Sarah J. Maas is the same way, and they've even done reissues of some of her books, even more minimalistic, because they know that they sell really well. And I love that, but I've seen a lot of smaller presses and even some big presses. And like you were saying, Melissa, there's quite a few recently in Big Six that I've seen who've had 3 or 4 books, and then the 5th and the 6th don't even look remotely like the other ones. And I'm going, is everything okay? Like, did something happen? Because, I've seen, there's some examples of people that have taken over different artists, but they always try to recreate what was done first. I think Theodore Goss's books, The Sinister Mystery of the The Sinister Mystery of the Mesmerizing Girl, is the 3rd of the series. And I believe it's a different artist, but they recreated the same look. So it feels the same. But yeah, I think you can still be ornate and be simple, but it's too many sources make it really difficult. And so when you start getting people that are not facing the light the same way, or that are in complicated poses, and you've clearly put a lot of people to try to get everyone, it doesn't really look real anymore. And you get that uncanny valley, or you don't know where to look. And that's where simplicity, I think, really gets across. And to me, I prefer a much cleaner cover. And I have had more fun with some of the really simple covers than I have with the ones with, everything in the world happening at once.
Do you think that the Twilight books had anything to do with that kind of shift toward minimal design?
Potentially. And 50 Shades of Grey did the same thing. And I think it was a real mark of like adult versus children's, because I mean, the best-selling series of all time before that was Harry Potter, and it leaned very, very much on really detailed art for children. And I think by going other direction, you're saying this ain't for kids anymore.
Right.
This is, and then YA since then has really taken off. I think the Caraval books are the same way. I mean, they still have beautiful illustrations, and but they're small in the space of everything happening. The City of Brass series is another one that I can think of that just really has gorgeous colors and textures, but yet is somehow simple and very, very clear. So,
Maya, what about you?
I think it's sort of the inverse of what I said earlier about making sure that your book appears like the genre, is that the covers that look like somebody has gone out, looked at the top 10 bestsellers and tried to copy their cover, and you're going, which of the 50 paranormal romance authors is this belonging to where they all blend together. So you need something that's sort of signature to make your series or book stand out.
Which urban fantasy series with a male protagonist is this gritty guy standing at a quarter turn with a long coat, one glowing
under
hand
the
in
streetlight?
Yeah.
Or the leather pants, lower back tattoo, crop top, sword.
Yes.
Yes.
The poses,
over their shoulder.
that made
impossible.
Jim Hines uber famous, because he then tried to copy those poses and almost ended up in Traction.
The spinal,
Yeah.
One thing you brought up, Natania, was the idea that you sometimes change artists in mid-series, and I've seen some that have come out of major presses that looked like books 1 and 2 didn't sell as well as they expected. So book 3 does not have that same really nice painted cover. I'm like, all of a sudden your intern did this one.
Well, that's the trilogy death spiral that I've heard many people discuss, and I think that that's totally true. Or repackaging the next series under somebody else's name, renaming the author. I've seen that too. But yeah, look, I mean, design is such an important part, and a lot of, I think, fantastic authors have developed a style around their work. Sherry Priest is a great example. You know, a Sherry Priest book, regardless of how many sort of different versions of Gothic horror or steampunk or historical fiction she does, you know that's her books, because they've got that down. And that's kind of the dream situation, right? That you can kind of know somebody by the work that they do. So
it's kind of interesting too, whenever you see, they're trying to get, if it's a longer series, they're trying to get some of the earliest ones more attention, because a lot of times they'll repackage the whole set. Like the Laurel K. Hamilton's, Anita Blake books, they did that, kind of going away from that, more 80s, 90s style to the more minimalistic, single image type thing.
They did that with Rachel Aaron's Eli Monpress books too. They went back and recovered, I think, the first 3 when 4 was coming out. And because the first 3, when they were first released, I thought it was a fantasy romance series. And then I read the first one, I was like, this does not match the cover, because this is a swashbuckly, adventure-y, Princess Bride style story, not I'm expecting to see Fabio on the battlements any moment, which is what the cover was. So they went back and repackaged them with very much action, swashbuckly, much more Errol Flynn than Fabio style covers. So Natania, what would you say is what's one style of book or one author that you've always wanted to do a cover for, but you've never been able to?
That's a really good question. Trying to think.
Thanks,
I
just came up with it today. Thanks, I just came up with the question today.
Very good. I will say I've just finished reading, or I'm in the process of reading the second of Tamsin Muir's Gideon the Ninth and Harrow the Ninth. And it's all about a bunch of awesome space lesbian necromancers, and the cover art is incredible. And I don't do much, I mean, just unbelievably beautiful work. And in the book too, I mean, I've stop a few passages and be like, I should give up writing now, because that paragraph about what bones looked like was better than anything that I've ever written in my life. But anyway, we need to be humbled every now and again. But I don't do a lot of science fiction that's kind of like space opera science fiction. I'm not a big fan of military stuff. I generally don't like doing guns if I don't have to in the books that I do. So thankfully it's never been an issue, but I think I would love to do some cool space opera stuff for authors that are doing that kind of like progressive, really interesting magic and, you know, wizards in space. Wizards in space is my answer.
All right. Maya, what about you?
I guess I have two answers. From a fangirl book nerd perspective, Mercedes Lackey, because I have always loved Valdemar, and the details that the cover artists have gotten wrong about the characters drive me nuts. And so as a Valdemar fan, yes, I've always just wanted to fix those covers and be like, these are the covers you deserve. But then also from an art perspective, probably Star Wars, because what made me want to be a digital artist was a documentary on ILM and the magic they used to make Star Wars. So that's really what made me a digital artist. So making a book cover for them would be like full circle.
And a good check.
Yeah, I mean, a check from Disney wouldn't hurt.
Right. I'm never going to see one of those because I'm on the Authors and Dragons podcast. So we're never getting hired by Disney.
Oh.
Ever. Melissa.
I want to do cozy mystery covers.
Oh,
I know.
I love
I want to give you a hug.
especially ones with books and typewriters and cats and coffee.
Melissa wants to be Lillian Jackson Braun's cover artist.
Mm-hmm.
I love all of them, and they're kind of hokey, and you know, they're colorful and bright and happy, and I want to do those.
There's nothing wrong with wanting the occasional thing to be bright and happy. You have Natania and I for the complete goth world.
I mean, I have flowers on my black shirt. That's why I always feel the kinship with Persephone. She's flowers and skulls. It's kind of,
Yeah, it works.
I feel that way. Yeah. Okay.
All right, we're coming up on our time for the night. So let's take a couple of quick minutes and you can tell folks where to find out more about you and how to hire you if they want to pay you to design covers for them. Melissa, how can people find you?
You can get to most of my information through the Falstaff Books website, so falstaffbooks.com. I'm on Facebook and Twitter. I don't remember what the names of them are.
But you also manage the Falstaff Books social media, so they can reach you through there.
Yes. Yeah. So if you can find John, you can find me usually.
You'll actually, if you reach out to John, you'll probably reach Melissa first.
That's very true. Maya, where can people find you?
You can find me at mayarenee.com or mayapreisler.com. You can also find me across social media as Maya Preisler.
All right. Natania, what about you?
Shockingly, nataniabarron.com is my website. I am on Twitter as @NataniaBarron and on Instagram as @NataniaBarron. So as long as you can spell my name right once and copy it and paste it, you should be able to find it. The only derivation I have of that is, or deviation, slightly different words, is that I've recently been making a fool of myself on TikTok, and I'm @Natania Books there. And you can look at all of my writing advice, bits and bobs, and doing weird things that embarrass my children. But if you want to hire me, I take limited clients, but you can always, my daughter says, but she, but yeah, I'm always happy to talk about it. And if I don't have time, I can always link you up with somebody else as well. So like some of the people here on this very panel.
All right. Well, thank you all very much for joining us. Thank you guys at home. I am John Hartness. I've been your host for the evening. You can find out more about me at falstaffbooks.com. And until next time, thank you guys, and we'll see you next week in the panel room.
Bye.
Bye.